The ringing phone
We
felt
have a
like a
serious
siren in the
problem.
silence of the
The deal is
executive
falling
boardroom.
through, and I need you
Daniel
to handle
Lawson,
it
the
immediately.
billionaire CEO of Lawson Enterprises, was about to wrap up a tense meeting with his top directors. Everyone around the table was on edge because the latest quarterly reports looked grim in certain areas. In that room, the hush was heavy and full of judgment faces were tight with stress, and the tension clung to the air like a thick fog that refused to lift. The phone kept ringing. Daniel frowned as he noticed it was not his personal assistant's line or even his private business line, it was his cell phone, flashing an international code he did not recognize. Normally, he would ignore such calls. Most of the time they were spam or people trying to pitch random ventures he had no interest in, but there was something about that moment, maybe the unease already crackling in the room, that made him pick up. He rose from the glass table and stepped to the side, holding up one hand to signal everyone to keep quiet. He pressed the phone to his ear, his eyebrows drawn in suspicion. The line hissed with static for a few seconds. He heard nothing except faint crackling and distant city sounds. Then a small voice emerged. It was shaky, quiet, and afraid. "Dad," said the boy, sounding as if the word itself was uncertain on his tongue. "Dad, can you come and get me, please?" Daniel froze. He felt his heart slam against his chest so hard he thought everyone in the room could hear it. There was a wave of confusion. Because he only had two children, one was grown and studying in Europe, and the other was a teenager who lived in Manhattan with Daniel's ex-wife. Neither child was 7 years old, and neither child would ever call him from a foreign number with a trembling voice like that. But there was no mistake in the boy's words. He had called Daniel Dad. Daniel's mouth went dry. He stared at the wide glass windows of the boardroom, which overlooked the city skyline. The city seemed to stretch into the distance, tall buildings and bright signs that usually brought him comfort. Now it felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath him. He tried to speak, but his voice stuck. Inside the boardroom, the directors waited, perplexed by their CEO's sudden shift in mood. They could see the color drain from his face. Some exchanged wary looks. Daniel lifted the phone away from his ear and stared at the foreign number on the screen, as though it might vanish. "Hello," he managed to say, trying not to sound as panicked as he felt. "Hello? Who is this?" There was a sniff on the other end. The boy let out a small sob. "It's me," he said, as if that should explain everything. Mom said you could help me, but she's gone. Dad, please, I'm so scared." Daniel's head spun. He felt as if he had been punched in the gut. Was this a cruel prank? Was it some scheme to blackmail him? It made no sense. His voice grew urgent, but he kept it low enough that his directors wouldn't overhear everything. "Where are you? Who gave you my number?" The boy let out another shaking breath. He paused, stumbling over what he tried to say next. "I'm in a place where everyone is angry. People yell at me on the street. I can't speak their language. I only know a little. They call me a dirty foreigner. They call me bad words. They laugh at me because my skin is a different color. Please come help me." Daniel looked to the table where a few directors were whispering to each other. He felt the walls closing in on him, his chest tight with a sense of dread that made no sense. "I can't understand you. I need to know your address. I need to know who you are." "You're my dad," the boy repeated. "Please come. I'm only 7. I'm alone." And then, just like that, the line went dead. Daniel stood in the boardroom, phone still pressed to his ear, shock flooding every muscle in his body. The call had lasted under a minute, and it left him with only questions. He realized he was holding his breath. The tension in his shoulders hurt. When he lowered the phone, he saw the directors staring. He offered them a stiff nod and said, "We'll continue this later." His voice was cracked. Without another word, he walked out of the room, ignoring the flurry of concerned murmurs that trailed behind him. His mind was in chaos. He replayed the boy's voice, the sob, the clear fear. "Dad," he had said. It made Daniel's stomach twist in a way he had never felt before. There was an unsettling heaviness in those words. The child sounded certain, and the child was in trouble. That was the most frightening part. The boy was alone in a place where people hurled insults at him, words like dirty foreigner. People mocking him for his skin color. How could this child be calling him Daniel of all people? And how would he even begin to figure out where he was? Daniel was so consumed by those questions that he barely noticed reaching his office. His personal assistant, Brenda, stood up from her desk, alarmed by the look on his face. "Sir, is everything all right?" He shook his head, going inside and gently shutting the door. He needed privacy. He sank into the leather chair behind his mahogany desk, staring at the phone in his hand as if it were a ticking bomb. He felt unsteady, unsure if the boy would call again or if he had lost that chance forever. The number wasn't saved in his phone, in fact. There was no caller ID besides the strange country code. He didn't even know how to call the boy back. Daniel, who was used to controlling everything in his life, felt a new kind of terror. The worst part, it was only the beginning. Before that unsettling call, Daniel had lived a life that many envied. He grew up in a middle-class family, but through sheer determination, bold investments, and a bit of luck, he built a business empire. Lawson Enterprises owned a wide range of companies: real estate, technology, media, and more. His name was famous in business circles. Interviews with him were always in high demand. He lived in a sleek penthouse in the heart of the city, rode in a private car, and flew in a private jet. He had a membership at exclusive clubs and dined at high-end restaurants. He had been married once. His ex-wife, Melissa, was the mother of their 2 children, Sophie, who was now 19, and Jonathan, who was 15. Their divorce was amicable enough, though it left scars. He tried to stay involved in his children's lives, but the demands of his business often pulled him away. He justified it by telling himself that he was providing for them, and when you are a billionaire, you can provide a lot in material terms. Yet despite all his success, Daniel had a coldness in him that showed up in the way he ran his empire. He was strict. He did not like chaos. He demanded that people follow rules. He had little patience for mistakes. When it came to social issues, Daniel mostly stayed quiet. He donated to charities, but it was all part of public image. Deep down, he tried not to think too hard about problems like racism or poverty. Those were uncomfortable topics. They were far from his world of polished offices and power lunches. He never expected that a single phone call could rip open his perfect bubble. The voice of a child calling him dad was not on his carefully written life plan. Daniel found himself thinking about that shaky voice every minute after it rang off. He felt helpless, and that feeling was new and unwelcome. Inside his office, Daniel tried to regain control. He called Brenda in. She looked concerned, fiddling with the pens in her pocket, but she was used to handling tasks for him with calm efficiency. "Brenda," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I need you to figure out the origin of this call." He handed her a slip of paper where he had written the number. "Can we do that?" Brenda nodded, though she looked puzzled. "Yes, sir, I'll get on it right away." He stared at his phone, praying the boy might call back. "If this number calls again, put it through to me immediately." He paused, then said in a quieter voice, "This is urgent. Please keep it to yourself." Brenda nodded, gave him a polite bow of her head, and left. For the next few hours, Daniel tried to immerse himself in emails, financial reports, and corporate paperwork. But he couldn't focus. He kept remembering the trembling voice, the fear in that child's words. Then his mind spun with the possibility: could he actually have a child out there, someone he did not know about? It seemed unreal, but he had traveled a lot in his younger years. He had been careless at times. He had met many people, gone to many parties, lived a fast life before he settled down and married Melissa. Unwanted images passed through his mind: women he had dated, places he had visited. Was it possible that somewhere across the ocean someone had given birth to his child without his knowledge? The thought made him feel guilty and angry at the same time. He had never intended to abandon anyone if there truly was a child. And if that child was now alone, then what kind of father was he for leaving him in a place so hostile? At lunchtime, Daniel realized he was not hungry. He asked Brenda for an update, but she said it was still in progress. He paced in his office, ignoring calls from his directors and business partners. He was not ready to face them. Everything seemed small compared to the possibility that a helpless child was in danger somewhere, calling him dad. Finally, in the afternoon, Brenda knocked on the door. Her expression was serious. She held a small folder. "Sir, I got some basic information from the phone records. It's a number based in a country in Eastern Europe. The region code is for an area near the border of 2 nations that have recently had tension over immigration. I think it might be from a refugee area or at least somewhere with a lot of unrest." She hesitated, then said softly, "That area has had reports of racist attacks on people with darker skin. It's been in some news stories." Daniel's face was grim as he read the paper she gave him. It was just basic data about the call's origin. But it was more than he had a few hours ago. He remembered the boy saying that people yelled at him on the streets, calling him a dirty foreigner, mocking the color of his skin. "All right," Daniel said, "thank you." And before he could finish, the phone on his desk rang. Both of them looked at it. Tension filled the air. It was the same foreign number. Daniel scrambled to grab the receiver. "Hello?" he asked, keeping his voice calm but feeling his heart gallop inside his chest. The boy was crying. Dad, his voice was a little louder now, but still full of fear. Please don't be mad at me. I used the phone from a market vendor. He let me borrow it. He said I have to give it back soon. Daniel tried not to sound overwhelmed. I'm not mad. He said, I need to know where you are. He fumbled for a pen, motioning Brenda to stay. She hovered near the desk, ready to jot down any details. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're staying. My name's Samir, the boy said softly. Mom always called me that. I'm at a shelter. But they said I can only stay for a little while. They keep telling me I have to leave because I'm not from this country. They say I don't have the right papers, Dad. I'm scared they will send me away or do something bad to me. Daniel felt a surge of guilt and confusion. The name Samir was not anything like his or his ex-wife's. This child was from a different cultural background. Samir, Daniel repeated, Tell me about your mother. Is she with you? No, he said, voice breaking. She died a month ago. She got very sick. She told me before she died you would come someday. She had your picture. It's old, but it looks like you. She said she tried to reach you before, but she couldn't. Please don't leave me. I'm alone. Daniel's vision blurred from how intense the moment felt. He pressed his eyes shut. If this boy had an old picture of him and his mother had tried to reach him, then maybe this was real. Samir, he said, controlling his shaking voice, I won't leave you, but you need to tell me where you are exactly, which city, which shelter. Samir sniffed, struggling with the words. The city is called Devinsk, I think. The shelter is in a place called District 14. I'm not sure that's what's on the door. He paused. They don't like me here. People stare at me. I have darker skin. They say I don't belong. They call me names. Brenda scribbled fast on a notepad. Her eyes wide, Daniel nodded. Okay, Samir, listen carefully. I'm going to help. But I need you to stay safe. Don't leave the shelter if you can help it. Can you stay until I come? Samir began to cry again. I can try, but they say I have to leave soon. Tell them to let you stay a little longer, Daniel said. Though he knew a child might not have much bargaining power, I'll do what I can. Do you have a phone to call me back? No, Samir whispered. I'm using the vendor's phone now, but he wants it back. I don't have anything else. Daniel felt panic rising. All right, give me the vendor. Let me speak to him. He wanted to arrange something to pay the vendor to let Samir have access to a phone. The line rustled and he heard distant voices. But then Samir said, Dad, he says I have to go now. He doesn't speak much English. Dad, please hurry. I don't know what to do. I promise I'll come, Daniel blurted. Don't move from that shelter, all right. I'll figure something out, okay? Okay, Samir said. I'm sorry. I have to go. I can't talk anymore. Then the line clicked off. Daniel sat there breathing hard, staring at the phone. Brenda was still standing, her notepad in hand. They locked eyes, and she gave him a fragile nod. He did not know what to say. He was in a state of shock. That single call had turned his entire life upside down. There was no doubt in his mind that the child on the other end was genuinely terrified. He seemed honest. Why else would he call an unknown number from across the world, calling that person Dad? And there was mention of a photograph, something that had to tie Daniel to Samir's mother. Then there was the talk of racism. The child was stuck in a hostile place. Daniel realized he had never confronted racism in his own life beyond hearing about it on the news. He had never felt the weight of it, never had to face it directly, but now it was personal. In that moment, Daniel made a decision that would shape everything that followed. He was going to Devinsk. He was going to find Samir, and he was going to learn the truth, whatever that truth might be. Daniel moved quickly. He instructed Brenda to set up a trip. He did not care about the cost. He wanted a flight as soon as possible. He also asked her to gather any available information on Devinsk, on District 14, and on shelters there. Meanwhile, he tried to calm his own mind. His thoughts were swirling with memories of a business trip to Eastern Europe many years ago. Could he have met Samir's mother then? He barely remembered the details, but he recalled a woman with a soft smile who helped him with translation in a small city. They might have spent time together. It had been so long ago. And at that time, Daniel had been lonely and unhappy despite his growing fortune. He might have let himself get close to someone he didn't really know well. After that, he went home and resumed his life. The memory was fuzzy, but the more he tried, the more he felt a twinge of guilt. He kept his phone right next to him, hoping Samir might call again. He also considered ways to contact the shelter directly. But Samir had given him only minimal information. Devinsk might have many shelters, or maybe only one. Brenda was searching for that data, but time was crucial. Samir had said they were kicking him out soon. A child with no papers, no guardian, would be at the mercy of the street's worse, in a place where hatred for foreigners ran high. A young boy alone could face serious danger. Daniel also wondered what his board of directors would say if they discovered he was leaving the country so suddenly, or what the media might say. He was a billionaire CEO, the face of a global brand, and he was about to vanish on a personal matter. But he realized none of that mattered as much as the child who might be his son. He had Brenda clear his schedule for a week. The board could manage in his absence. He had senior officers who could hold things together. Normally, he would never do something like this. He insisted on having final control, but this time he had no choice. He did not fully understand why it felt so urgent. Perhaps it was paternal instinct. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear of what would happen if he did not act. That evening, Daniel prepared to leave his office. His assistant had booked him on a private jet. They would leave early the next morning. Brenda handed him a thick folder. I found some details on Devinsk shelters. There is one in District 14 that's run by a small charity. The place has a history of turning away refugees or undocumented immigrants once they run out of space. It's an overcrowded area with poor funding. It's also known for aggression against people from different backgrounds. She paused, then said gently, "Sir, be careful there. It's not a safe place." Daniel gave her a tired nod. "Thank you, Brenda. You've done well." "Sir," she added, biting her lip, "I know this might be out of line, but is everything okay? This is so sudden." He did not want to tell her all the details. He did not want to talk about the possibility that he had a son he never knew. It felt too shameful, too personal. "I'll handle it," he said simply, "but I appreciate your concern." After she left, Daniel slumped in his chair. He pressed his hands to his temples and took a deep breath. In less than 24 hours, he would be on the other side of the world, hunting for a boy named Samir, a boy who said he was Daniel's son, a boy who was alone in a rough place full of hatred for strangers. Daniel closed his eyes and tried to picture Samir. He imagined a small child with dark hair, maybe darker skin. He might look nothing like Daniel, yet the child had called him Dad, longing for safety. That word still sent an ache through Daniel's chest. There was no running from it now. He had to see this through, no matter what ugly truths might come out. Early the next morning, Daniel left his penthouse. He told his ex-wife he had an urgent business trip. She only knew that something was off in his voice. Their teenage son, Jonathan, would stay with her for the week. His older daughter, Sophie, was still studying abroad. Daniel did not tell either of them where he was really going. He arrived at the private airstrip where his jet awaited. He was dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, no business suit this time. He wanted to move without drawing attention. A few staff members were there to see him off, but they had no idea of his true destination or purpose. As far as they knew, he was traveling to secure a business deal in Eastern Europe. Once on the plane, Daniel tried to rest, but his mind would not stop spinning. Questions battered him at every turn. Was Samir really his child? If so, how was it possible? Daniel never knew. Had the mother tried to contact him? He thought of all the letters and messages that might have been filtered out by staff or lost in the shuffle of his corporate empire. He felt a stabbing guilt. If he had known earlier, maybe Samir would not be in such a dire situation now. He also could not stop thinking about the mention of racism. Daniel had grown up as a white American in a comfortable setting. He never had to deal with discrimination based on his appearance. He had read about it, watched films, heard stories, but it was never something he faced personally. Now a child who might be his own flesh and blood was in a place where hatred was common, and at times violent. The thought made him feel sick. The flight lasted many hours. Daniel worked with his phone to find any further information on Devinsk, but connectivity was spotty in the air. He put his head back and tried to picture how he might react if Samir turned out not to be his child. The boy clearly believed Daniel was his father, but maybe it was just a similarity in appearance or confusion. Would Daniel still help him? He knew the answer was yes. He could not leave a 7-year-old to fend for himself in such a place. But the possibility that Samir might indeed share his blood lingered in Daniel's mind, stirring up emotions he was not used to feeling. When the plane finally landed in a larger city near Devinsk, the night sky had fallen. Lights twinkled on the horizon, revealing a place both foreign and subdued. Daniel stepped off the plane and was met by a driver he had arranged through a local contact. His name was Javan, a tall, thin man with a kind face who spoke broken English. They would have to drive a few hours to reach Devinsk. The local airport was too small to handle private jets, so this larger city was the closest landing spot. The car ride was long. The roads were poorly lit, full of bumps and winding lanes. Daniel could not help but notice how different this area was from the glamorous city life he was used to. Buildings were old, many with peeling paint and broken windows. He saw groups of people on the streets looking weary, wearing layers of clothes against the cold wind. The driver tried to make small talk, but Daniel was too deep in thought to answer much. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, they reached Divinsk. It was not a large city, but it had a busy, chaotic center. Many of the streets were empty now aside from a few late-night wanderers and stray dogs. Street lamps flickered weekly graffiti-covered walls, some of it hateful slogans in a language Daniel did not understand. He glimpsed one phrase in English, "Go home, foreigners." It sent a chill through him, and he thought of Samir alone in this hostile place. Javan pulled up to a small, modest hotel Daniel had booked. The man helped Daniel carry his bags in and offered to remain on call. Daniel thanked him and took a room on the second floor. It was nothing like the luxury hotels Daniel was used to. The bed was lumpy and the walls were thin. He heard neighbors speaking in loud voices on the other side. But he was too tired to mind. He collapsed on the bed, pushing his suitcase aside, and let his body sink into restless sleep. Daniel woke up after only a few hours. His body felt heavy from the long journey, but he knew he had work to do. He had the address of the shelter in District 14. He left the hotel right after dawn, not bothering with breakfast. Javan was already waiting outside in the car, sipping coffee from a paper cup. They drove through the city, passing crowded areas where street vendors were setting up stalls. The roads were uneven, full of puddles from the night's rain. People walked quickly, some heading to jobs, some to markets. Daniel noticed that many faces were pale, others were clearly of different origins, possibly from neighboring regions or even farther away. He spotted a few men glancing around nervously, their eyes darting from corner to corner as if expecting trouble. The tension grew as they approached District 14. The buildings here looked even older, more rundown. Some had boarded up windows, trash piled in corners, and the smell of stale water and rot lingered in the air. Daniel could see that this part of town was neglected, lacking basic services. Groups of young men loitered on the sidewalks, smoking and talking in hushed voices. "This is not a good place," Javan said quietly, slowing the car. "We must be careful here. The shelter you want is down that road." He pointed to a narrow street that disappeared between two crumbling buildings. Daniel nodded. "Come with me if you can. I might need your help with translation. I don't speak the local language." Javan agreed, though he looked uneasy. They parked near the entrance of the narrow street, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the shelter. On the walls, Daniel saw hateful graffiti with slurs against foreigners. One had an image of a caricature that was deeply offensive, showing a dark-skinned person with exaggerated features. Daniel felt disgust twist in his gut. The shelter building was marked by a small sign in the local language with an English line beneath it, Community Help Center. The door was locked. Daniel knocked, and after a moment a middle-aged woman with tired eyes answered. She asked something in a curt tone, glancing at Daniel with suspicion. Javan spoke for Daniel, explaining that they were looking for a young boy named Samir, about 7 years old with darker skin. The woman frowned and said something quickly in response. Javan looked back at Daniel. "She says many children come through here, but she doesn't remember a boy by that name. She wants to know why you're asking." Daniel sighed, feeling his hope deflate. "Tell her he's my son. He has no one else, and I came all the way from America to find him." Javan translated. The woman's expression changed slightly, showing a flicker of concern. She stepped aside to let them in. The inside of the shelter was cramped, with rows of cots and worn blankets. A few people were there, mostly women and children, eyeing Daniel wearily. The woman led them to a small office. There they met a man with glasses who appeared to be in charge. Javan repeated the story. The man rubbed his temples. He said that yes, a boy with darker skin had been here briefly. The boy spoke some English, said his father was from America, but the child was very upset and frightened. The boy disappeared days ago because the shelter told him they were at capacity. They told him they could not keep him indefinitely, especially if he had no documents. The man shrugged, looking uneasy. He explained that the shelter had too many people in need. They did not have the resources to keep a lone child who had no local ties. Daniel felt fury flare in his chest. "He's 7 years old," he said, voice shaking. "You just sent him away." The man did not meet Daniel's eyes. Through Javan, he said that he was sorry, but that was the reality. They were overwhelmed. The child had no official papers, no mother, no local guardian, so they could not help. They had told him to go to the immigration office for assistance, but he never came back. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He struggled to keep his composure. He realized anger would not bring Samir back. He asked the man if there was any clue, any idea where Samir might have gone. The man said he did not know for certain, but sometimes homeless children ended up in an abandoned warehouse district near the old train tracks. It was a dangerous area full of gangs and thieves, but children with nowhere else to go often hid there. With that slim lead, Daniel and Javan left the shelter. Daniel's mind felt numb with dread. Samir was alone on these hostile streets. If the child had ended up in that warehouse district, who knew what dangers he faced? Javan led him back to the car, and they drove toward the old train tracks. It took nearly an hour, navigating through narrow lanes, bumping over potholes. They passed rows of vacant buildings, some with smashed windows, others with graffiti scrawled all over. At one point, a group of young men glared at them. Daniel noticed one of them spit on the ground near the car. The tension in the air was thick. When they reached the area near the tracks, Daniel stepped out, telling Javan to wait in the car for safety. "If I'm not back in an hour," Daniel said, "call the police, call the embassy, call someone." Javan nodded, clearly frightened but loyal enough to stay. Daniel moved carefully among the deserted buildings, calling Samir. Into the echoing silence, he checked corners, peered into broken windows, saw only broken glass and trash. He ventured into a large warehouse that smelled of mildew and rust. The roof had gaping holes, letting in slants of gray daylight. He spotted a makeshift bed in a corner, blankets, and a battered pillow, but there was no child. "Samir," Daniel called, feeling his voice shake. "Samir, it's me, Daniel." He thought about calling himself Dad, but it felt strange. He was not sure if Samir would answer to that, or if the boy might be hiding out of fear. The echo of his voice came back to him, lonely and empty. For 2 hours, Daniel searched that area. He found no sign of Samir once he thought he heard footsteps, but it turned out to be a stray cat rummaging through trash. Another time, he saw a figure dart out of a side door. He ran after it, but when he turned the corner, the alley was empty. Finally, he trudged back to the car, heart heavy. "No luck?" Javan asked quietly. Daniel slumped in the passenger seat. "He's not here, or at least I can't find him. I don't know what else to do." His mind whirled with possibilities. Should he try the immigration office? Maybe, but the system might be slow, and Samir might not have gone there. Should he walk around the entire city calling out Samir's name? That was impossible. Divinsk was not huge, but it was still too large to search aimlessly. He remembered Samir mentioning a market vendor who let him use the phone. That market might be the key. Daniel turned to Javan and asked if there was a well-known market in District 14. Javan nodded and said there was a large open-air market where many stalls were set up, catering to the poorer neighborhoods. Perhaps that was where Samir borrowed a phone. Without hesitation, they drove back toward District 14. The sun was higher now, and the market was in full swing. Shouts of vendors rose in the air. People crowded around stalls selling fruits, vegetables, cheap clothing, household goods. The smell of spices, sweat, and fried food hung thickly. Daniel walked with Javan through the market, drawing attention because of his foreign appearance and possibly because he was better dressed than most here. Even in his casual clothes, he noticed some unfriendly looks. He also noticed some people seemed curious, but wary. He tried to keep calm. They asked stall owners if a small boy had borrowed someone's phone to call America. Some shook their heads, some shrugged. Uninterested in a stranger's questions, others just glared and told Daniel and Javan to move along. They went stall by stall, asking the same question. Finally, an older man with a bent back and kind eyes spoke up in the local language. Javan's eyes lit up. He turned to Daniel. "He says he knows of a boy who borrowed a phone a few days ago. The boy was alone, looked scared. He had darker skin and said he was calling his father." Daniel's heart pounded. "Ask him if he knows where the boy went." Javan spoke to the man, who rubbed his chin and then replied in a thoughtful tone. After a moment, Javan turned back. "He says the boy hasn't come back for the last 2 days, but sometimes the boy slept behind the stalls at night. He would hide under a tarp. The man warned him it was dangerous, but the boy had nowhere else to go. He also saw some local teens bullying the boy, throwing things at him, calling him names. He tried to help, but the boy ran off. Daniel's chest tightened. Can he guess where the boy might have gone now? Javan asked, but the man shook his head sadly. He did not know. A wave of helplessness washed over Daniel. He thanked the man anyway, pulling out some bills from his wallet to give him as a gesture of gratitude. The old man tried to refuse, but Daniel insisted. "Thank you for helping him," Daniel said through Javan's translation. They walked further into the market, searching for more clues. Daniel could not shake the image of Samir crouching behind a stall, alone in the cold, being bullied for the color of his skin. This was a child, not some adult who could fight back or navigate the complexities of immigration offices. It was too cruel. At one point, a group of teenage boys swaggered by. They were laughing and pushing each other. Daniel noticed them staring at him. One of them muttered something. Javan tensed. "They're insulting you," he said quietly. "And they're saying something about the little foreign boy. They're mocking him, calling him a slur." Daniel felt rage burn inside him. He walked over to them, ignoring Javan's plea to be careful. "Have you seen a 7-year-old boy?" Daniel asked, voice tight, darker skin, alone, named Samir. One teen tall with a shaved head gave Daniel a sneer. "Why do you care?" He said in broken English, "That little rat." "We saw him," he chuckled cruelly. "He cries like a baby, begs for money. He doesn't belong here." Daniel balled his fists. "Where is he now?" The teens just laughed. One said something in their language, another made a mocking face, then spat on the ground. The tall one said in English, "We don't know, maybe we chased him away, could be hiding in the old building by the river. We saw him run that way a few nights ago, maybe he drowned." He shrugged with a cruel grin. Javan pulled Daniel back before he could lash out. The teens kept laughing as they walked away, tossing more insults. Daniel stood there shaking with anger and fear. He could not believe how openly cruel they were. This was the reality Samir had been facing. Javan put a hand on Daniel's arm. "Let's check the building by the river. It's not safe to start a fight here." Daniel nodded, biting back the urge to explode. He followed Javan back to the car. They asked some locals and eventually found out where the old building by the river was. It was a half-collapsed structure on the outskirts of the market district, near the water's edge. They drove alongside the river, which was brown with runoff and debris. A foul smell rose from the banks. The building was covered in graffiti. Windows smashed, a sagging chain-link fence surrounded part of it. Daniel and Javan parked nearby and approached on foot cautiously. They pushed open a broken gate and stepped inside. The building's interior was dim. Dust motes floated in stale air. Trash was scattered around. There was a faint sound of dripping water. Daniel felt dread coil in his stomach. He called out, "Samir. Samir, are you here? It's me, Daniel. I came to help you." They moved deeper inside. The floor was littered with scraps of cardboard, old food containers, and broken glass. The place was large, so they had to be methodical. They checked empty rooms, calling Samir's name. At one point, they heard a rustling sound from a corner. Daniel carefully approached, heart pounding. He saw a small figure crouched behind a stack of crates, trembling. "Samir," Daniel whispered, stepping closer. The figure bolted, trying to run, but Daniel was quicker. He dashed around the crates and caught a glimpse of a child with big, terrified eyes. The child was indeed darker, and he looked underfed, his clothes tattered. Daniel raised his hands, palms outward, to show he meant no harm. "It's okay." He said gently, "I'm Daniel. Are you Samir?" The boy panted, eyes darting around for an escape route. Slowly, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photograph of himself, something he used on business ID cards, hoping it might be recognized. The boy's eyes flicked to it. Then he stared at Daniel's face. "Samir," Daniel said, voice tight with emotion, "I came to find you. I came from America. I'm the one you called. Please don't be afraid." The boy's lips quivered. Tears sprang into his eyes, but he did not run. Daniel could see bruises on the boy's arms and a cut on his cheek. It was clear he had been hurt. Javan stood back, letting Daniel handle the moment. Finally, the boy gasped, "Dad," in a shaky voice. Daniel felt his own eyes burn with tears he was not accustomed to shedding. He took a careful step forward, kneeling so he was on the boy's level. "Samir," he said softly, "I'm so sorry I took so long. I didn't know you were here. Let's get you somewhere safe, please." Samir's small body trembled. He looked as if he could not believe this was real. Slowly, he inched forward. Daniel reached out gently. and Samir collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Daniel felt the thinness of Samir's frame, how frail he was. He held the boy, heart pounding with a mix of regret and relief. "It's okay," Daniel whispered, fighting his own tears. "I'm here now, I won't leave you." Samir sobbed against Daniel's shoulder, clinging with desperation. Daniel stroked the boy's hair, tears burning his eyes. They stayed like that for a while, neither moving, until Samir's sobs quieted. Javan stood nearby, keeping watch, wiping at his own eyes. At last Daniel carefully lifted Samir to his feet. "Let's go," he said. "We have a car outside. We'll get you food, a warm bed, and medical care. Then we'll go home." He did not even know what home meant at this moment, but he could not leave Samir in this broken place. Samir sniffed, nodding. He looked exhausted. As if he might collapse, Daniel took off his jacket and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. Then they led him outside. The daylight made Samir squint, and Daniel realized how long the child must have been hiding in the darkness. They got him into the backseat of the car. Javan handed Samir a bottle of water, which he drank greedily. Daniel gently asked about the bruises. Samir shrugged, tears still in the corners of his eyes. "Some boys threw rocks at me," he whispered. "They called me names I tried to hide." Daniel's heart twisted. He reached over and smoothed Samir's hair. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "No one should treat you like that. You didn't do anything wrong." Samir just stared at his lap, as if not sure how to respond to kindness. They drove back to the small hotel, though Daniel knew he could not keep Samir there long term. He needed to find a safer place or a better hotel. But first Samir needed rest and medical attention. Daniel and Javan helped him into Daniel's room. Daniel asked Javan to buy some clean clothes and simple food while Daniel tried to clean Samir up in the bathroom. Daniel ran a lukewarm bath. The water pipes groaned in protest, but soon the tub filled. Samir stood awkwardly, trembling. Daniel gave him privacy, stepping out of the bathroom while Samir got in. But he stayed close enough to help if needed. He called through the door, "Are you okay in there?" There was a quiet yes, then Samir said softly, "Thank you." Daniel wiped at his eyes, not sure why he was so emotional. "Don't thank me." He muttered to himself, "I should have been here earlier." He took a deep breath and stepped into the small hallway. He called Brenda from his phone, explaining he had found the boy, that the boy's name was Samir, and that he appeared to be alone in a very dangerous area. Daniel asked Brenda to get in touch with the American embassy in the larger city. Perhaps they could help with paperwork for Samir to come to the United States. Brenda promised to do whatever she could. When Javan returned, Daniel thanked him and took the bag of clothes and food. He heard the water draining in the bathroom, so he knocked. Samir opened the door wrapped in a towel, looking shy. Daniel handed him the clean clothes, a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, plus new underwear. Samir changed while Daniel looked away politely. After Samir was dressed, Daniel helped him apply antiseptic to the cuts on his arms and face. The boy flinched but tried to hold still. Daniel could see old bruises as well, marks of a longer struggle. He felt a boiling rage that such harm had come to a child, especially one that might be his. They sat on the bed, and Samir ate the food with shaky hands, bread, some meat, and an apple. He ate quickly. As if afraid it would be taken away, Daniel watched him, feeling guilt and sadness. When Samir finally slowed down, Daniel gently asked, Can you tell me about your mother?" He had to know more to piece together the puzzle of how Samir came to be here. Samir stared at the floor. "Her name was Layla," he said quietly. "She said she met you a long time ago. She showed me a picture you were smiling together. She said you were traveling for business. She got pregnant after you left, but she didn't know how to reach you. She tried writing to your company, but she never got a reply. We moved around a lot. People didn't like us because we looked different. Mom's skin was lighter than mine, but still different from the people here. She got sick. And the hospital wouldn't help her because she didn't have papers. She died at home." Samir's eyes welled up again, but he kept speaking. "She told me before she died that if I could reach you, you would help me. She gave me your phone number from an old paper. I tried calling, but I didn't have a phone. Then that vendor let me borrow his phone for some coins. That's when I talked to you. But the next day the shelter kicked me out, and people started being mean, so I hid." Daniel listened, his heart heavy with shame. He remembered Layla, now a sweet, intelligent woman who had helped him translate on that trip. He had been younger, impulsive. They spent a week or two together, enjoying each other's company. She was warm, with a curious mind. He left promising to keep in touch. But life got busy. He never followed through, and apparently any letters she sent never reached him or were ignored by staff. Now she was gone, and Samir had borne the brunt of that abandonment. Daniel felt tears gathering in his eyes. He wrapped an arm around Samir's shoulders. The boy leaned into him, still shy. "I'm sorry," Daniel whispered. "I didn't know. If I had known, I would have come right away." Samir nodded, though he looked confused. "Do you really mean that? You won't leave me?" Daniel pulled him closer. "I won't leave you. I came all this way, didn't I? You're coming home with me, Samir. You deserve a safe life." Samir nodded again, as if unsure whether to believe it. He had known only rejection for so long, yet there was a small light of hope in his eyes. Daniel knew the road ahead would not be simple. Getting Samir out of Dvinsk legally required documents, and Samir had none. They spent the next day at government offices where Daniel tried to explain the situation. He had to bribe a few officials just to get them to pay attention. He never liked doing that, but here corruption was common, and Samir's situation was urgent. They needed proof that Daniel was indeed Samir's father. That meant a DNA test, which could take time. Daniel pulled every string he could, using his wealth and connections to speed the process. He also contacted the American embassy. A representative there agreed to help expedite the paperwork, especially once Daniel's identity as a famous CEO came to light. Sometimes power and money could be used for good. Meanwhile, Daniel stayed in a safer hotel on the nicer side of town. He took Samir to a doctor for a checkup. The boy was malnourished, had some minor infections, and needed vaccinations. Daniel stood by, letting doctors treat Samir, feeling a pang each time the boy winced at a needle. Samir tried to be brave, but he was still just a child who had been through too much. Outside the medical clinic, Daniel saw more signs of racism. There were posters that portrayed foreigners as criminals. He overheard people muttering about immigrants taking jobs. He noticed that Samir shrank from certain groups of people, as if expecting a blow or an insult. Daniel felt anger flare each time, but he had to keep calm for Samir's sake. One morning they were walking back from a nearby cafe where Samir had enjoyed a rare treat of hot chocolate. A group of men stared at them, whispering. One spat in Samir's direction, calling out a slur that Daniel did not fully understand, but the hateful tone was clear. Samir gripped Daniel's hand, fear in his eyes. Daniel turned to the group, ready to confront them, but they just laughed and walked away. Daniel felt powerless to fight every instance of bigotry. It stung him, though he realized that Samir had faced this every day of his short life simply because of his appearance and background. This was the first time Daniel truly understood what it meant for someone to be hated for their skin color or for being a foreigner. It made him reflect on his own life, how easy it had been for him to ignore such issues. Now it was personal. Now it was his child who was the target. Despite the challenges, the days waiting for paperwork and DNA test results allowed Daniel and Samir to bond. They stayed in the hotel together. Samir was shy at first, not sure how to behave around this man he barely knew but had called Dad. Daniel tried to help him feel comfortable. They watched some cartoons on the television, though most channels were in the local language. Daniel would find English language shows or ones with minimal dialogue, and Samir would giggle at funny moments. Daniel also tried to learn about Samir's interests. He discovered Samir loved drawing. One day Daniel brought back colored pencils and a sketch pad. Samir lit up with excitement. He started drawing small pictures of animals, nature scenes, and occasionally a figure that looked like a woman, no doubt his mother. Daniel sat beside him, praising his work. He saw the boy smile, a genuine smile that lit up his face, free of the fear that usually lurked in his eyes. Sometimes Samir had nightmares. He would wake in the middle of the night crying and calling out in confusion. Daniel would rush to his side, turning on the lamp. He would comfort Samir until the boy calmed down. Each time Samir would cling to Daniel and whisper, "You won't leave me." And each time Daniel softly promised, "Never, I'm here." Daniel realized that fatherhood went beyond biology. It meant being there for this child who had known only fear and loss. It meant protecting him and offering love. For the first time, Daniel felt a sense of purpose stronger than any business venture. All the board meetings, the profits, the accolades, they meant little compared to Samir's well-being. This was a new feeling, and it changed Daniel from the inside out. Finally, after more than a week, the DNA test results came back. Daniel opened the envelope with shaking hands. Samir sat on the bed, swinging his legs nervously. Javan, who had been a steady helper, stood near the door, trying to read Daniel's expression. Inside, the official document stated in simple terms Daniel Lawson was indeed a 999% genetic match to Samir. The boy was Daniel's biological son. Daniel let out a long breath, tears in his eyes. He glanced at Samir, who looked confused. "It means you're really my son," Daniel said quietly, "there's no doubt." Samir's eyes grew wide. "Does that mean I can go with you? I can live with you?" There was hope and fear in his voice. Daniel crouched in front of him, nodding. "Yes, it means you belong with me legally. We'll get everything in order. We'll go back home. And I'll take care of you. You won't be alone ever again." Samir's lower lip quivered, and he nodded, blinking back tears. He threw his arms around Daniel's neck, and Daniel hugged him tightly. Javan smiled, wiping his eyes, whispering something in his own language that sounded like a blessing. Over the next few days, Daniel worked with the embassy and local authorities to finalize the documents. He had to sign papers confirming he was taking full legal guardianship of Samir. There were interviews, more forms, and many stamps. It was bureaucracy at its finest. But Daniel did not complain. He would do anything to get Samir away from this hostile environment and into a safer home. Finally, the day came to leave Divinsk. Daniel had arranged for his private plane to pick them up from the larger airport again. Javan drove them to the airport, sharing a tearful goodbye with Samir. The boy hugged Javan, thanking him shyly for his help. Daniel pressed a generous amount of money into Javan's hand, but Javan resisted. "No, sir," he said. "You help me by reminding me what is good in life. Use your money to help your boy." In the end, Daniel insisted Javan accept something. So Javan relented. They parted ways with gratitude in their hearts. Daniel felt a deep respect for Javan, who had guided him through an unfamiliar land with kindness and courage. Samir clung to Daniel's hand as they walked across the tarmac to the waiting jet. The boy looked up at the plane in awe. He had never flown before. The sound of the engines made him flinch, but Daniel squeezed his hand reassuringly. A flight attendant greeted them politely, though Daniel could sense her surprise at seeing Daniel, a well-known CEO, traveling with a young boy who looked so different from him. She was discreet enough not to stare too long. They settled into comfortable seats. Daniel explained to Samir how the plane would take off, how his ears might pop, how it might feel a little scary at first. Samir nodded, holding Daniel's hand. When the plane roared down the runway and lifted into the sky, Samir's eyes were wide with wonder. Daniel watched him, heart swelling with affection. He realized that Samir had never seen the world from above, never experienced the ease that Daniel took for granted every time he traveled. The flight back to the United States took many hours. Samir dozed on and off, occasionally peeking out the window at the clouds. Daniel gave him headphones to watch a kid-friendly movie. Sometimes Samir would glance at Daniel, as if checking to make sure he was still there. Each time, Daniel gave him a reassuring smile or a gentle pat on the shoulder. They landed at a private airfield in the late afternoon. The sun was bright, the air warm. Samir shielded his eyes, looking around. Daniel's driver was waiting with the car. They loaded up and began the drive to Daniel's penthouse. Samir pressed his face to the window, staring at the tall buildings, the bustling streets, the shiny cars. It was a whole new world compared to the grim sights he had known in Divinsk. When they arrived at the penthouse, Samir was overwhelmed. The soaring windows, the elegant furniture, the polished floors, it was all so grand. Daniel knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This is our home now," he said gently. "You can explore, but if anything seems too strange or scary, just tell me." Samir nodded, too stunned to speak. He walked around, touching the furniture, gazing at the city view from the windows. Daniel felt a pang of worry. Would Samir find this place comforting, or would it be intimidating? He wanted Samir to feel safe, not overwhelmed by luxury. Daniel showed Samir to a bedroom that had been a guest room but was now set up for Samir. There were child-friendly sheets on the bed, a small desk, and some toys Daniel had asked Brenda to prepare. Samir's eyes grew large at the sight of the toys. He approached them carefully, as if unsure he was allowed to touch them. "They're yours," Daniel said, noticing Samir's hesitation. "Everything in this room is yours." Samir bit his lip, tears brimming. "I never had so many things," he whispered. Daniel's throat felt tight. "Well, now you do," he said, brushing a hand over Samir's hair. "This is your home." Samir stepped closer to Daniel, hugging him. Daniel hugged him back, feeling the weight of his promise. He would protect Samir, love him, and give him the care he had been denied all these years. However, not everything was easy once they were back. The world did not change just because Samir had arrived in America. Daniel soon learned that prejudice existed here too. It was less open and violent than in Divinsk, but it still showed its face in subtle ways. He enrolled Samir in a good private school, wanting him to catch up on his education. Samir struggled with the language, but the school offered support. Some of the children were kind, but others stared at Samir's darker skin and whispered. A few asked rude questions like, "Why don't you look like your dad?" Samir came home one day teary-eyed, asking why he did not look like Daniel or the other kids. Daniel tried his best to explain that families come in all forms, that what truly mattered was the love they shared. But Samir was only 7, and the pain of feeling different ran deep. Daniel also noticed how some of his business associates reacted upon meeting Samir. They smiled politely, but he caught the flicker of confusion or even disapproval on their faces. Some kept their distance, as if uncertain how to handle the situation. It made Daniel furious, but he remained outwardly calm. A turning point came when Daniel's own father, an older man with strong opinions, visited. He saw Samir and immediately frowned, asking Daniel in a private moment, "Are you sure this is your kid? He doesn't look like you. Are you sure you're not being scammed?" Daniel's blood boiled, but he kept his voice steady. "We did a DNA test. He's my son, and don't ever speak about him that way again. He's family." His father's face hardened. "Well, if that's the case, I guess we have to accept it. But you might want to think about the image you're presenting. This could cause trouble for you in business circles." Daniel glared. "I don't care about the business circles, Dad. If my associates can't handle the fact that I have a child who looks different, that's their problem. I care about Samir. I will protect him no matter what anyone says." His father huffed, shaking his head, but eventually left without pushing further. Daniel realized that racism was not confined to distant lands. It was here too, sometimes hidden behind polite smiles or old biases. But Daniel would fight it, because now it was about his own son. In the months that followed, Samir began to settle into his new life. Daniel hired a tutor to help Samir catch up in reading, writing, and math. Samir proved to be bright and eager to learn. He made a few friends in school who admired his drawing skills. Over time, Samir's English improved dramatically, and he started to come out of his shell. Daniel also introduced Samir to Sophie and Jonathan, his older children. At first, they were surprised they had not known about Samir. Sophie was more open-minded and was curious about her new half-brother. She spent time talking to him, helping him with his English. Jonathan was a bit more reserved, but he eventually warmed up, especially when Samir shyly asked if he could watch Jonathan play video games. They began to bond, though it took time. Daniel watched the 3 siblings together, feeling a mix of pride and regret. He wished he had known about Samir earlier so these moments could have started long ago, but he tried to focus on the present. Each day, Samir grew a little more confident. Each day, Daniel learned more about being a father who was emotionally present, not just financially supportive. Daniel also made changes in his company. He became more vocal about fighting discrimination. He started programs aimed at diversity and inclusion, not just in America, but in the regions where Lawson Enterprises operated. Some of his board members questioned the shift, seeing it as unnecessary politics, but Daniel stood firm, explaining that if the company wanted his leadership, it would also follow his moral stance. He would not support any form of racism or hatred. Slowly, people around him noticed his transformation. Employees saw a warmer side of their CEO, someone who understood compassion and empathy. Daniel did not suddenly become a saint, but he was no longer the cold, distant billionaire. He was a father who had traveled across the world to rescue a boy who was his own flesh and blood, a boy tormented by racism and left alone. That journey changed Daniel forever. Despite all the progress, a certain fear lingered in Daniel's mind, the fear that Samir's past might not be fully behind him. He worried about whether Samir felt truly secure, or if the child still lived with the suspicion that the world might turn on him at any moment. One evening, nearly a year after Samir had come to live with Daniel, the phone rang again. It was late, and Daniel was reading Samir a bedtime story. The house phone rarely rang at that hour, so Daniel felt a jolt of unease. He picked up the phone. The line was full of static, reminding him of that first call. A voice came through, distorted. "Hello, is this Daniel Lawson?" Daniel's heart thumped. "Yes, who is this?" The voice paused. "I'm calling from Divinsk. My name is Victor. I run a small charity in District 14, now the same place you took Samir from. We've had an incident." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of incident?" Victor's voice wavered. A group attacked our shelter. They scrawled racist slogans on the walls, set fire to some rooms. We managed to get everyone out, but we're overwhelmed. I found a letter addressed to you hidden in one of our old files. It seems the mother of Samir wrote it before she died. I thought you should have it. Daniel's heart pounded. A letter from Layla. Yes, he breathed. Victor, I'm sorry I didn't find it earlier. But the place was chaotic. Now we're trying to rebuild. I just came across it. I think it might have important information for you and Samir. Daniel felt a swirl of emotions. Layla had tried to reach him. There was one more letter out there. Can you send it to me? He asked, voice tight. Email or mail, whichever is faster. Victor agreed. They exchanged information. After the call ended, Daniel stood there, phone in hand, dread and curiosity swirling in his chest. Samir tugged at his sleeve. Dad, what's wrong? Daniel forced a small smile. Someone from your old shelter found a letter from your mom. They'll send it to us. Samir's eyes widened. Mom, what does it say? I don't know yet, Daniel said gently, but we'll find out soon. For the next several days, Daniel could hardly think of anything else. Samir also grew anxious, worried the letter might hold secrets or regrets from his mother. Daniel tried to reassure him. Whatever it says, she loved you. She was trying to protect you. That's all we need to know. Finally, an envelope arrived by international courier. The postmark was from Vinsk. Daniel's hands shook as he opened it. Samir stood by, clutching a stuffed bear Daniel had given him. The letter was handwritten in careful English. Daniel recognized Layla's neat script from the time she had helped him all those years ago. He began to read aloud. My dearest Samir, if you are reading this, it means I could not deliver it to Daniel in time. I want you to know that he never abandoned you on purpose. I tried to reach out, but life was unkind. I do not blame him for not knowing. I only hope he will be kind when he learns about you. There is something else you should know. Our family line comes from a place with a rich culture, a place that has often been judged by the color of our skin. But you must never let hate define you. You are more than their words. You have a light inside you, Samir. Let it shine no matter where you go. Daniel, if you read this, please forgive me for not finding you sooner. Please take care of our son. Raise him to be strong, to be proud of who he is. Show him the beauty of your world. But do not let him forget his roots. Teach him that love is stronger than any hatred. I loved you once, Daniel, and a part of me always will. But most of all, I love Samir. He is the best part of both of us. Layla. By the time Daniel finished, tears glistened in his eyes, and Samir was sobbing quietly. Daniel knelt down and hugged him. They stayed like that for a long time, feeling Layla's presence in the simple words she had written. At last Samir pulled away, wiping his nose. She still loved us, he whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, she wanted us to find each other. Samir looked at him, eyes full of tears and hope, and we did because of her. They both understood that this letter was the final piece of a painful, beautiful puzzle. Racism, hatred, and separation had torn them apart. But love, determination, and the echo of a mother's last wishes had brought them together. Daniel realized this was the moment of true closure, but also a new beginning. He was going to fulfill Layla's plea to raise Samir with pride, with strength, and with love that overcame any hatred aimed at him. He thought of the countless others still trapped in places like Vinsk, facing racism alone. Daniel knew he could not change the entire world by himself, but he could start by changing the world for Samir. And so he held his son, promising in a soft, firm voice, I will always protect you. I will always love you, and together we will face anything no matter how dark because we have each other. Samir nodded, a small smile breaking through his tears. In that smile Daniel saw hope, a hope stronger than all the cruelty in the world. And he knew at last that neither of them would ever walk alone again.